Hello, Mike. How's it going?
I'm well, Shaun. How are you? I love the kickoff of the show. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. Where in the world are you?
I actually live in the Rocky Mountains near Salt Lake City.
Oh, wow. Do they have skiing up there then?
We have Park City. In fact, about 20 minutes from my home was the top of the downhill run for the 2002 Winter Olympics, and it's just a gorgeous spot on earth.
Oh, I've seen some photos of that area and it is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a great experience. Actually, I was part of the Olympic command, and we had I was at the Attorney General at that time, and we had a great experience welcoming the world. It was a lot of fun.
So you're not quite far from Arizona then. Did you get over to Arizona at all?
Well, Arizona is probably an 8-hour drive,
Okay.
and but we do have a home in the southwest corner of Utah as well, which is near Las Vegas, and so when the winter snows are too deep, we head down there, and that way we can spend some time on the desert.
Well, congratulations on your YouTube channel. And what made you start a YouTube channel?
You know, it's the craziest thing. My kids, I think, got so sick and tired of hearing me give old cop stories that they said, "Hey, why don't you just record one of them and let's let people listen to it?" And I figured there'd be 4 or 5 people that listened in, and for some reason, it seemed to resonate with people, and we just had a blast doing it.
And your kids are their ears are less damaged now, I take it, with you concentrating on YouTube.
That's right. They can just turn me loose to unsuspecting folks like your audience. I will force them to listen to my dribble.
How many books have you written?
You know, I've been really fortunate. I've written 6 or 7 books. I just came out with my most recent, and actually on August 1st, I'll be releasing another one that I've been working and retooling a little bit. So I took advantage of COVID and used it as a time to write some things that I hadn't gotten done.
So what I'm about to announce to the people watching this is absolutely incredible, and we salute you. So through his work, Mike has rescued 32 kids who suffered more than 4,000 counts of sexual abuse and assault. Can you believe that? That ties in exactly with what we've been talking about on this channel. It's not just speaking about these things, it's actually making real world changes and saving kids. That is absolutely incredible. Could you start out by telling us how you got to that point?
Oh, well, you know, that was 32 children in one case alone. I was actually a property crimes investigator, Shaun. I had a bunch of officers working, and we were selling stolen cars and buying stolen cars, and we were working trying to get into chop shops. And one day I happened to stop in the county attorney's office where I worked, and a woman was standing there, and she said, "Hey, can I just ask you a quick question?" I responded, a beautiful young girl, and she said, "Listen, I've been involved in a ritual cult that's been sexually abusing children. Can you help me?" And I'd never investigated sex crimes, and I was a SWAT cop and a property crimes investigator. And the district attorney felt like he wanted me to follow through on that case, and it launched into the largest investigation of my career. It took probably 4 years of my life away. And at the end, we in fact rescued 32 children. We had I thought 4,000 plus counts of sexual assault. When we were on the Dr. Phil show, the girls surprised me. I hadn't seen them in 30 years. They're now 45-year-old women. And they said, "Oh no, try doubling." It was probably more like 8 or 10,000 assaults that occurred. And so it was just an absolutely horrendous group that used religion as a power guise to get access to children. And they literally raped children every single day for about a 5-year period of time before we broke them up.
How did this cult come about?
You know, it started as an excommunicated member of the Latter-day Saint faith. He had been kicked out of the Latter-day Saint church for practicing his beliefs of polygamy and weird doctrine. And so what he did is he set about making his own church, and he slowly got followers. And this is part of what we explore in the book is the fact that these cult leaders are so skilled at grooming and preparing people that otherwise would never commit crime to do atrocious things. And his group grew to about 120 people by the time we raided it on one early August morning, 30 years ago, in about a month and a half.
Good grief. So when it was raided then, how many co-conspirators were arrested, and what kind of sentences did the main perpetrators get?
You know, we were really concerned because the group had a doomsday mentality, much like we see in many of these whacked out groups. And we were concerned about weapons stockpiling. Again, this is the United States, so we make sure we have plenty of weapons at hand. And they were stockpiling food and medical supplies. They were teaching their people how to shoot. So we were very concerned about how we were going to hit the compound, which was about 14 homes. And so we, in the early morning hours of August 3rd, I believe it was, we took 70 police officers, 70, Shaun, and we hit all of the homes at one time. And it was just quite miraculous that there were no gunshots. There were no incidents. Within about 3 minutes, we had all the homes secured, and people were contained. And over the course of the months that followed, we ended up charging 12 people with serious sexual crimes against children. All 12 were convicted, which is, again, one of the more remarkable things about this. All 12 pled guilty rather than go to trial. Some took us through preliminary hearings, but we had developed a case that was strong enough that they didn't try that. And then they went to prison, and thankfully the self-proclaimed prophet died in prison.
What kind of sentences did the co-conspirators get?
It was really interesting because only 3 of the 12 were men. The rest were women, and this was really difficult for the court system and for people to just kind of accept that women are so predatory. But these women were very predatory and very abusive to the children. The courts had a difficult time wrapping their head around that, and so many of the women were given shorter sentences and released. The self-proclaimed prophet and his lieutenant, a woman, spent the greatest amount of time. She ended up spending 10 years, and the Board of Pardons let her out for some reason early. I assume she completed her welding class and was rehabilitated or something, and then, of course, the self-proclaimed prophet died in prison at about age 80.
Again, that just ties into what we're saying on this channel. You know, if it was a drug case, they'd be handing out decades to all the co-conspirators. It's like crimes against kids. The justice system doesn't seem to value them in many cases. Would you agree with that?
You know, I don't know if it's that or if we haven't figured out how to crack the nut yet. I mean, it is really difficult for us. We end up, you and I, for instance, are good examples. We end up putting our own value system on the predator that we're dealing with. We think, I would never conspire to kill someone, or I would never conspire to sexually assault a 6-year-old child. And so our minds just can't wrap around that. But when faced with such solid evidence, it really is surprising at times that the court will lean toward, oh, let's just kind of hope it really didn't happen as egregiously as it appeared. And sometimes we see these lighter sentences. One of the problems with drug abuse, and I think leads to some of the challenge that you're talking about, is that in the early stages of the drug war, we had minimum mandatory sentences that said, here's the standard, and you've got to fill this standard. And so we ended up putting people who had addictions in prison rather than getting them help and trying to change them. The challenge is we put them in a correction system where they're surrounded by evil, and they come out worse than they start.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Do you want to take us through the Morphew case then? Explain what that's about.
Yeah, and I would just like to say, I'd love to have you. I think we'll put a link in there somewhere, but this is all chronicled in a book called Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, and folks can find that on Amazon. The Morphew case was really intriguing because from a couple of standpoints for me, this was a beautiful mom, age 49 at the time that she disappeared. It was Mother's Day. She had two beautiful daughters who were away at a church camp. Her husband woke up in the early morning hours and said, "Oh, I know it's Mother's Day, but I got to go to work in Denver, some 2 hours away," and leaves the home. Mysteriously, during that time, she disappears, and he comes up with a number of possible reasons of how that could have happened. But as those alibis or ideas came forward, it just was the kind of thing that just didn't make sense. One that drove me crazy was that she must have gone out for a bike ride and was attacked by a mountain lion. And it was, in fact, so egregious that on our channel, we finally brought in the Mountain Lion Foundation biologists, and we said, let's talk about mountain lion behavior. Let's talk about what a kill site looks like when a mountain lion takes something down, and that it doesn't pick up a 120-pound, 130-pound woman and carry without some kind of artifact of dragging or something else. And so all these ideas we just shot holes in. We talked about the bicycle and whether it was an accident. And again, we looked at physical evidence and forensic evidence, and we said, how realistic is this? And so we went in and started picking apart that. And of course, the thing that I found so interesting is that there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who disappear in our country every year. Worldwide, the numbers are consistent. And yet when it's someone that seems to be of a certain class or race, or they fit that beautiful mom that's just in utopian life, instead of someone who's living in impoverished conditions or something else, we seem to grab onto those, and we kind of forget about the hundreds and hundreds of moms that disappear that come from poor situations.
Yeah, and these are the ones that grab the headlines, aren't they? Like the Menendez brothers case, because how could rich kids be the perpetrators? Things like that. The Madeleine McCann case over here, Jean-Benet Ramsey over there. But look at the amount of money spent on Madeleine McCann. But every year, all these thousands upon thousands of kids go missing, and there's no resources spent on it whatsoever. There's definitely a discrepancy. Okay, so there was various theories for her disappearance, and you guys helped the family as well.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because you wonder what role we really play as YouTubers in trying to just bring stuff to the public attention. Well, in this particular case, the family asked us for help, and we thought there are some things that we can do. We don't want to get in the way of law enforcement. They have the authority, they have the responsibility, and we want to be able to just empower the public that if you have seen something happen or something that's goofy, make sure you're reporting it to law enforcement. So first and foremost, that was one thing we could do. But then the brother of Suzanne said, I want to organize a search. And the sheriff was like, nah, we've had 100 people looking around, and we just don't think there's any value in that. And we said, how can you deny a family that wants to go to work and try to find their loved one? And so we helped them organize a search. We helped them raise thousands and thousands of dollars to pay for lodging and other kinds of things. And they ultimately got, by some reports, Shaun, 700 volunteers who came out. We went to my day job, and my boss gave me permission to use our technology, and we actually empowered all of those searchers with the ability to track them in real time on their mobile phones as they walked around and took pictures of things that troubled them. And so we saw this kind of coming together of public law enforcement and private enterprise, the public who want to try to do something. And it brought some shortfalls, in my opinion, between government and what groups like yours and mine do, that government has to figure out how to manage these public armies that can be amassed in such a short amount of time, whether it's through social media complaining about something or boots on the ground that are saying, we'll go walk in that park for you. Just tell us where to walk.
Yeah, because we've seen that work in a good way in the documentary Don't F with Cats. And we also saw it work in a bad way with the one about the hotel where the Asian girl come out the
The
elevator,
oh
Cecil
yeah,
Hotel,
there,
and
yeah,
and the sleuths kind of like hounded that gothic. I think he was from Mexico, the gothic guy, and his life still hasn't recovered.
yeah, yeah. They and and this is another problem with the true crime community or YouTubers that are pursuing clicks rather than just pursuing what's right and trying to do things. We have YouTubers and people in the public that are showing up on the doorsteps of victims' homes or other things and trying to get that 1 in a million video. I mean, this is so invasive into people's lives, and we really need to leave the professionals doing what the professionals should do and remember what swim lane we're in.
Well, on that note, I did show up at Maxwell's door, but she wasn't home, and it wasn't to hound her. It was just to see if we could get some footage of the white banister, but which we were able to obtain, which leads us on to your work. I've been watching your channel. I've been watching your videos about Maxwell and Jean-Luc Brunel and victim grooming, allegations of special treatment, etc. So, what got you interested in the Epstein case?
Well, I think number one is Epstein was a predator of children, and of course that always is something that makes me want to understand. Number one, what is it in the psyche that says this is appealing to me as a predator, that I'm going to pursue children? But more importantly, I look at it from a standpoint of prevention, of how can we somehow empower the public, a mom and dad to teach their children, or a school to talk about when people are being groomed by so many different things. And what we saw with Maxwell, under the direction, I believe, of Epstein, is that she's out grooming girls who then turn into the groomers themselves within the high school. And all of this is happening around the need for this will be the most important moment in my life. I've never been in a limo. I've never been in the backyard of a mansion and sat by the pool. And these predators are so good at taking advantage of the chinks in our armor, the weakness that we have. And, we used to say in law enforcement, you can just about arrest anybody if you boil down to three things: sex, money, or drugs. Well, it's the same for predators and everything else. If you can appeal to something that they need, in this case, going to girls' trailers where they live in a trailer park and flaunting them with money and other kinds of things. This is so predatory and so disturbing to me that I just felt like that we needed to talk about these grooming tactics and remind everybody of that thing that our parents used to say to us about, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a podcast with Dr. Sarah Good. We called it Inside the Minds of Pedophiles. And she talked about how there's a justification in their minds. And Epstein was talking to one journalist, and he was saying, centuries ago, this was normal. It's just moral relativism. And, there's nothing wrong with it, basically. It's just times have changed. And he was just trying to completely justify his behavior. So did you see any other kind of symptoms of sickness?
Yeah, it makes me so angry, Shaun, because rather than owning the pedophilia or the sickness, what we want to do is try to justify and make it right. Going back to that Zion Society case, that self-proclaimed prophet, if he could convince people, well, I don't want to have sex with 6-year-old girls, but God told me to. Well, come on. There's a time to own up for your behavior. And the bottom line is, who cares if something was a norm in the 1400s or the 1500s? In today's day, it's against the law, and these predators know it's against the law. They choose to violate public standards. They choose to injure children. And then they turn around and try to hide under the guise of, I had a vision, or it just used to be done that way. No. And when you look at the way these predators work, not only do they know that it's wrong, but their behavior tells us how much they know it's wrong because of all the effort they put into keeping it concealed.
Well said. And regarding Ghislaine Maxwell, then, do you think it will go to trial, or a plea bargain will be struck, or some other ill-fated future awaits her?
I got a gut feeling this one's going to go to trial because every move she's made to get out of jail has been stopped. Every time she's complained, I need a special privilege, it's been stopped. Had Epstein not happened, had Brunel not surfaced, it makes you wonder if it's the single one-off. But now, as part of this co-conspirator event, I think government looks at these kinds of cases like, number one, we don't dare not follow through. But then you see all this wacky stuff. Like, I mean, we're still having to listen about Jeffrey Epstein, and he's been dead reportedly for 2 years. And yet just a few days ago, someone filed a $500 million lawsuit against him, refused to accept the settlement that was put out. His house is being raised, and we have to hear about Jeffrey Epstein. Florida Department of Law Enforcement's finishing up a review of Palm Beach, Florida's sheriff's office and the treatment that they gave him. I mean, how long does this predator get to continue to bug society?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ghislaine Maxwell's plea bargaining power is in the dirt right now, because we saw all her bail bond applications get denied. That was ludicrous that so many was made, I believe. We've seen all the motions go against her. We've seen people, we were speculating whether they would be classified as survivors or procurers. The 4 main women are going to be testifying against her now. So do you think then, with all that evidence against her now, she is going to roll the dice and go to trial and risk never ever getting out? And would that be because even if she had a plea bargain right now, the amount of years will be double digit anyway in that, and it would motivate her to roll the dice and go to trial?
Yeah, I don't know. That is so risky for a defendant to face what could be a lifetime in prison versus accepting a plea negotiation and taking a shorter time. The thing that's so interesting that we see starting to happen more and more is that the strategy might become to bog down the criminal justice system. The difference in her case is she's not out on her own recognizance somewhere or under bail somewhere, so she can't enjoy any kind of a normal life. She has to walk around wearing paper jail clothes, and so that's gonna push things along too. I don't know, what's your sense on it, Shaun?
So in the beginning, I thought that a rational person would sign a plea bargain, but from what I'm seeing, she's behaving more and more irrationally, and perhaps she's the shock of being incarcerated has destabilized her mentally. But perhaps to her, the prospect of not getting out in a couple of years or whatever it's going to be is worth it to her to risk rolling the dice and going to trial. I still think that her legal team will try to talk some sense into her before then, if they're acting in her best interest. But then on the other side, they've done so many bail applications, it's like they're just rinsing her for money. So perhaps they would make even more money if they did go to trial, and they'd be even more famous if they did go to trial. So there's just so many different forces. So my original assessment that it was definitely going to be a plea bargain, I would say I'm reducing that now, because there's information that's unfolded and her strange behavior, and I'm not sure whether her own legal team is acting in her own interest or in their own interest.
Oh yeah. No, I think I would agree. I would agree with you. This is going to be tricky to watch. And you think back, Epstein. you hate to be the first guy arrested, but maybe he was the lucky one. He used all of his influence and his money, and he was able to convince the attorneys to go forward without a criminal indictment and do some jail time served. How you can justify it as jail time served when you go to your office every day, I struggle with. But now the spotlight's on, and it's like the good deals might be gone.
Well, I'm praying that it does go to trial, because if she gets up on the stand and starts naming Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, Leon Black, Leslie Wexner, and on, I mean, if we think that the news coverage of this case has been big so far, that's just going to send it to a whole new level. It's going to be on fire all over the world if she starts to reveal things that have not been revealed. So it's going to be a very interesting second half of the year, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with you. This is going to be interesting to watch, and I suspect there are a lot of people that are nervous right now.
Yeah, one of my guests, Matthew Steeples, he's just put in the chat there that Maxwell has the same arrogant streak as her father, so perhaps she will be more prone to rolling the dice. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left then, so let's look at the Chad and Lori Daybell case. What happened there?
Oh, I mean, talk about another set of wacky circumstances. I mean, here is gasoline and a huge flame that come together somehow, and those two meet each other. You go back and you look into their backgrounds, and the thing that's been interesting to me is the number of people that have fallen by the wayside in Lori Daybell's life. I mean, you go back to, we know so little about husband number one and number two, but then Joe Ryan is assaulted by her brother, who's her chief lieutenant, and he ends up in the hospital. He later dies. That has been ruled as a natural death, and yet we had a physician on with us that talked about some of the things that were in the body tissue that was retained. He's been cremated, so there's no going back to the well and getting more information, but they do have some body samples. As they learn more, maybe they'll be able to get some chemicals or other things out of the tissues that'll be interesting. But then you have Charles Vallow, who's killed by Alex Cox, and Lori's brother again. You have all of a sudden the children dying, Tammy dying, Chad's wife, the two of them running off to Hawaii to be married and skip around on the sand. And now they're all back, and this thing's coming together. And I keep saying over and over again that what they exhibit is cult-like behaviors. They when a destructive cult, there were people that were in this group that, you wouldn't want to say are destructive cultists, but they were believers in this doomsday and end of world preparation and everything else. But as we watch this thing unfold, it is an amazing chess match that's going on. I think we're seeing a judge who is yielding to every request from the defense so that there is nothing that could be appealed later on, and probably sees it as a career case as the judge. Prosecutors and defense attorneys probably see it as career cases. And you got Lori, who, is now deemed incompetent. And I go back to, is she mentally ill? I'll let your viewers decide that. It would be hard for any of us to say that killing someone is not a form of mental illness. But again, I always go back to this idea: they knew what was societal standards, and they chose to violate it anyway. And then they chose to try to get away with it.
So how much time is this guy facing then?
Well, I think, Idaho has a death penalty, so they could get the death penalty. They certainly could face life in prison without parole. Now, Lori could end up in a mental institution until she's deemed competent. The interesting thing there is Idaho doesn't have an insanity defense law, so she can't say I'm just plain crazy. She has to sit in a hospital until she's deemed fit to participate in a trial, and then she's going to have to face the fiddler on that. So
So does her incompetency then preclude her from testifying against him?
Well, there's an interesting thing that I keep asking the question about, and that is we call it spousal privilege in many of the states in the United States, but husband or wife can't be compelled to testify against each other. So if that remains true there, then I think the interesting thing will be, will they somehow get a divorce, realizing, because I keep expecting one of them to throw the other one under the bus, but we'll see.
Wow. Okay, then. So, huge thank you to Mike King. We will have all of his links below the video on whatever we put over on YouTube. And the book that he mentioned earlier, let me see if I've got that written down somewhere. Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. So, I'm sure many of the viewers are going to want to go and check out your YouTube channel and grab a copy of your book. And huge thank you for coming on, Mike. And hopefully we can do something in the future.
I would like that very much, Shaun. Thank you so much. We'll get you back on Profiling Evil for choir practice.
Cheers, Mike. Good night there. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.